All right, so this
Hey.
is our this is my philosophy 395 podcast, and we will be discussing art and morality and how does an artist's relationship to their work, in this case music, impact our responses to their actions. Just as a preface, we've had this conversation before. It didn't save, and it was like an hour and 20 minutes. So we're gonna dial it down here, cut it down, and we'll probably have a little bit more like refined responses, but we're still gonna run through the same conversation we had. I'm Jack Mullins.
I'm Matea Becerra.
All right, so we're going to walk through three different approaches to art and morality by Eric Mathis, and I'm just going to get your opinions on them, ask a couple questions, ask a couple follow-up questions with some examples, and we'll just have a conversation through that.
Sounds good.
So, first we have the normative approach. So, this essentially says that we should make moral assessments based on how you should or are supposed to react to works of art. So when a person commits an immoral action, we believe that's an immoral person. And when an immoral person makes music, we believe that's immoral music. So basically, if it's a bad person, then their music is inherently like tinged by who they are. What are your thoughts on that? Just straight up.
Yeah. I don't necessarily think that's true. I think that everything and like music and art like does have a lot of subjectivity, like a part of it. It's not completely objective, and like just because a person who is immoral creates something doesn't like inherently mean that that thing is also going to be immoral. Like they can still make great music and make great songs like without even if they are an immoral person. And also like I guess it would have to like the parameters of exactly what would make somebody like where the line for immorality is. Like I just think that it's way too broad to be able to make that like statement make a statement like that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I personally agree. I think it is like way too broad. It just seems like you'd have to condemn a lot of things. I mean, obviously not everyone's perfect and people make mistakes here and there, and kind of like declaring what would be immoral and what wouldn't be, and it'd just be a big amount of things we'd have to discredit. But the backing for this is
Hmm.
kind of that um there's a problem socially, and it's that if you are listening to music from an artist that has done immoral things that are like widely known, then people that hear you listening to them might perceive you as endorsing that artist and their actions because you're listening to their music. And that just creates a problem about just perception in general. So the reason why you'd follow this is just to kind of stay safe in that realm and make sure that you're not offending people or promoting bad things by potentially endorsing that message. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I completely understand, like, that's a really, really slippery slope because I find myself, not listening to artists or endorsing any of their music, especially around other people, because um, I don't know how that response is going to be received. Because I think that, like, when it ultimately comes down to it, even if there's an artist that, like, I really I really enjoy, like, there could be something that is offensive about that they have done that somebody else, like, might find offensive or, like, wrong and enough on a scale that they wouldn't wanna listen to them, and same on the opposite, like, I know for me, I don't really listen to Chris Brown because I like my moral compass when I'm listening to Chris Brown like has alarms going off, and I just like for me like that ruins it. Listening to it like it just it ruins the experience because that's all that I can think about. So I think that definitely a lot of people do correlate like you listening to an artist with you endorsing them, but I I know that this isn't the best answer, but I still think that that's like a pretty slippery slope, and like I don't think that you can necessarily base like a person and their morals off of like something like that. What they what they listen to. Like me listening to a song that features Chris Brown doesn't mean that like I'm supporting abuse. You know, that's what at least that's what I think.
What do you think about cases where the subject matter of the song and the actions of the artist might be directly tied in a way that, so let's say the song AJ Nothing by Number by Aaliyah, R. Kelly was in the backings of creating that and had a hand in it, pretty big hand in it supposedly, and with the crimes that we associate him with, abuse and things like that, especially with Aaliyah, with her being underage and him engaging acts or getting married, all that kind of stuff. Do we think that there's maybe less of a case to say that maybe you're not endorsing the artist if it's almost like a confession of their actions?
Ah, I always, for me, like I think that that's really gross. First of all, just want to put that out there. The R. Kelly Aaliyah situation, it's really, really gross to me. It's clearly child grooming, and he's directly involved in obviously even like having that song come out. Um, I think for I don't have the best stance on this because I found myself recently getting very caught up in the how some like right now how it's going on where like whether or not an artist words and songs could be used against them in a courtroom and like I genuinely don't know what the correct answer for that is because it's like yes, art is heavily influenced by like a person and their actions and like their life, but like that doesn't necessarily mean that it is like a direct story. And obviously stories, fiction, like embellishments, making stuff up, like what even is true and what part of it is like a confession versus what part is exaggerated. So I just like I find that to be so difficult, and I don't know what the right thing is. I really don't know what the right answer is. Like, I think maybe in I just think it needs to be a case by case situation. Like, you can't just slap the label saying that like either way for everything because like a lot of rap songs like really do detail like crimes and things that have happened. And like in the case of again, like the R. Kelly Aaliyah situation, obviously like that's one where it's like directly related to the offense that and all of R. Kelly's actions. But like it really needs to be case by case because it's slapping that label that like all um all music is like directly like taken from life experiences can be really really dangerous like when it comes down to it and in a lot of cases where that's not true and it could potentially like hurt and harm a lot of people.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
that's my answer.
No, I agree. And basically, what that sums up is just that with that normative point of view, it's kind of all too general. I mean, like I had to bring up a specific example to even ask you that question. So, like you're saying, it really is case by case. Um,
Yeah,
yeah. So, moving on, kind of to what you're well, this the examples later will prove to be the same as what you're saying about the true music about criminal lifestyles and things like that. We move on to this descriptive approach. So this is making moral assessments based on how people actually respond to the work. So with normative, it was about people should respond, but in talking about people actually respond, it's basing. So let's say someone did something immoral, whatever, whatever. It could be good, it could be bad, immoral or moral. We don't base it on how we think we should. So again, if some bad person made music, we wouldn't just instantly go, "Oh, it's bad." We would look at how it's perceived and base it off of that. So if someone that was considered a bad person made music, but the public reaction was, "Oh, the song's great," we would just be like, "Oh, okay, so it's okay to listen to it. This song is not immoral. It's a good song." Or the opposite. If people condemn something, then we deem it immoral. What do you think about that?
I think that like society and the crowd definitely have like a pretty large weight into deciding and I don't know what was the word that you were just using, like, um, per basically like the group. Oh, sorry, I'm trying to
Public
like think
reaction.
about the best way of, yeah, like public reaction is a really really like large thing that does have an effect on like the way that we perceive music, but I don't think that you can chalk it up to like everything being how we view things off of the public's reaction, because again, like me not wanting to listen to Chris Brown isn't because I think that other people are going to perceive me wrong for listening to him. It's just because like I I have a problem with that. Like me internally, without any outside opinion, like I find that to be wrong. So I think that it's still like, again, it definitely has an effect, but not like there's still like a lot of like personal and like subjectivity in there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. So, like you're saying, there's a point to be made in this theory, and it's that moral flaws can become artistic flaws if they prevent engagement with the work. So, like you're saying, Chris Brown's moral actions prevent your engagement with the work, which makes them artistic flaws. So,
Yeah.
in a similar way, like kind of like the inverse of that, I wanted to talk about, like you were saying earlier, like kind of true, almost like confessional music about living like dangerous lifestyles. So, well, we have an artist that makes music about
Mm,
lifestyle involving crimes like theft and murder, and the listener is kind of entertained by it in the sense that sometimes that music can be fast paced and have a lot of energy to it, and it's just really kind of yeah, it just has a lot of energy to it. You know, it's engaging. When a listener likes
yeah.
those kinds of artists or that kind of music, sometimes when the artist does something, like let's say someone that raps about murder a lot ends up actually murdering somebody, it makes the news, right? The listener won't necessarily feel like they have to like stop listening to their music because in a way it feels like something they might have already subscribed to. So it's kind of like what you're saying. So that flaw actually wouldn't prevent your engagement with the work because you're engaging with the work already that kind of contains that flaw. Do
Yeah,
you- yeah.
that's true. I don't think I've ever really thought about that before, but like definitely I know that like I know when I'm listening to somebody like Freddie Gibbs, who's from Gary, Indiana, and like the lifestyle that he has grown up in and like the stuff that he raps about, like if I were to see some headline in the news like of him something something gang violence, like I don't think that that would be anything shocking, like even in the even a little bit to me. Um so I think that like yeah, definitely definitely something like definitely the way and the lifestyle that they portray themselves to be the is what I would more like without necessarily having a parasocial relationship, but I think even subconsciously I would just like associate that type of a lifestyle that they talk about in their music or in their art like with the real lifestyle that they're living for sure.
Yeah, and I feel like too, it's interesting how we contextualize those immoral actions because, so for example, I listened to NBA YoungBoy, and if he actually killed somebody, I'd be like, yeah, I kind of expected him to do that. But if we
Yeah.
take someone like Ariana Grande, who's obviously a mainstream pop star, who has nothing to do with that, and she killed somebody, I'd probably be quick to say maybe I should reconsider listening to her music. But at the end of the day, they both did the same thing, you know? And
Yeah,
it's
true.
it's really interesting how they both did the same thing. They both make music, but I'm considering one to be possibly excusable from the point of view of a listener, at least, and the other one to be completely inexcusable. I feel like it completely changes her image, and that's just because we didn't expect it of her, or it's not contained in her artwork.
Yeah, 100%. That's funny. I also, if Ariana Grande killed somebody, I would genuinely that that would be a very different reaction by me than if, again, like somebody like Freddie Gibbs killed somebody. I would be like, "Damn, I can't believe you did that." But like, also, kind of expected it. I mean, not expected it, but like, it's just not even semi as shocking of a thing. So I think that also goes back to like again, music and like at least we assume an artist's artwork to still can you not hear me? Wait, hello? Okay, wait, hello?
Good, good. We're good. We're good.
Good?
All right.
Okay,
Last
okay. I don't know what
day
part
when
I cut out at.
it wouldn't be as shocking.
Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. It wouldn't be as shocking if it was somebody like Freddie Gibbs, but like that also gets me to think about like how I was saying earlier that even though like artwork really does to at least like some extent, at least we perceive it to be like a reflection of the person and of who it is. And I'm not saying that like it necessarily needs to be that case. And like but I do think that like you can't there's not complete separation between an artist and their work. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean it's like 100% ingrained, but that's at least how we associate them to be and their persona by the way that they by the contents and stuff that they talk about, and just the way that they even like have carry themselves online and just like their entire persona.
Yeah, I definitely think that's part of that context is just that we take, like you're saying, that music to be kind of like their thought process, like their stream of consciousness, and something that comes from the heart. So
Mhm.
we have expectations with that. Um, so I also want to talk about public perception and our trust in it in terms of music that we might not understand as much. So let's take, for example, Chicago drill music. In some Chicago drill songs, they'll throw around disses at each other, and sometimes these disses are about killing people in rival gangs or people that people are associated with, or just people would care about in opposing
Mhm.
groups. So a lot of times they throw on the name of a 15-year-old named Tuka who was killed from gang violence, which is horrible. Um, but they throw it around like it's just like a taunt of theirs in the scene, and it gets tossed around so much that someone who just started listening to Chicago drill music might not understand the gravity of a 15-year-old actually being shot and killed.
Yeah.
So, my point in saying this is that, in a way, the public perception of this has. I don't mean like mainstream media. Like, obviously, like news outlets aren't like covering Chicago drill that much. But in terms of how often they throw around Tuca's name, it's kind of like the public perception might have normalized it a little bit in a way where we're not like shocked when that happens. And why I say this is because in this theory, we're sort of trusting public perception. So just because it's starting to become normalized in Chicago drill, does that mean that it's not immoral? And do you have a problem with maybe that process?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I feel like I just have a like I have a problem with anything that really has to do with the idea of public perception. Like I feel like I might have alluded to that earlier, but like while I don't know how, like, I don't feel super comfortable making a point or taking a stance on whether or not this should be something that they are discussing and throwing around because it's not the lifestyle that I'm even semi involved in, and I have no idea what that's like. Um, I think that like I think that it's something that public perception shouldn't be an end all be all in what you in in anything. Like just because right now this isn't something that's been brought again like broadcasted to the public and like oh my gosh like look at this thing like that doesn't necessarily mean that it never will or that it's good or that it's bad. Like I just think that there's only so much that like people in the public can focus on at one time, and also the whole idea of like group mentality. um I think there's like a lot of cases in the past where things have been completely blown out of proportion just like by public opinion. Um, so I just don't I don't even remember what the initial question is for this one, but like I don't think that public public perception should really um I think whatever they focus on is just whatever is being brought to light in that moment, and that it, even if it hasn't been brought up yet, like that doesn't make a case for whether or not it's like immoral or moral in my eyes.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. I like that a lot. That just because it hasn't been brought up yet doesn't mean that it passes for now. And like you were saying about how you don't feel comfortable talking about the situation or making your own judgment on it because you're not in it, that's like part of my point being that um, the public that listens to the group of people listen to Chicago drill music is not all they are not all living in Chicago or
Yeah.
experiencing the actual drill scene for themselves. And especially with artists like Chief Keef, King Von, Lil Durk, all like becoming more popular, there's a lot more people involved in in the listening than there are in the lifestyle, like way more. And
Hmm.
trusting the public, that group of people to make that perception should kind of make us just as uncomfortable as making that perception ourselves, like you're saying.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, like, I think when it comes down to it, like, you're completely right. And I wish that it was almost like, I think it's a lot of responsibility on like the like singular person level. Like it is up to me to do the research into what I'm listening to and then make the decision of whether or not I subscribe to it. And I just think that that's not like the way that the world really works. It's not like we're 100% of all the media conscious of all of the media and every single thing that we are consuming. But I think that it just relies like a lot on the responsibility of like the single person. And that's why like we should be more aware of what we're listening to because it also, like we were talking about earlier, listening to that like can to some people, maybe if it was something that I was listening to and I was with somebody who's from Chicago and a part of that scene, they would b- almost they would feel like I'm taking a side because I'm listening to it, even though I have zero idea exactly like what like the weight of that means. So I think that it's just like a big lesson also on like the awareness that we should have for the media that we're consuming. And I guess also a little bit about how it's being perceived to other people, just at least some level of awareness.
I completely agree. It doesn't feel like you have like it doesn't feel like you're taking a stance when you're just listening to it like removed from the situation, but you're completely correct. If you're actually like found yourself with someone that's from that lifestyle or something like that, they'd probably have their own opinion on your listening habits and things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
So my last example on this theory, the descriptive approach, is something that I find to be a bit of like a curious case, like a one-off kind of thing. And maybe there are other examples of this too, but what came to my mind was so Michael Jackson has, we're going to call them allegations because I mean he's dead, they couldn't process them, all that kind of stuff, but they're heavily
Yeah.
associated with him, sexual misconduct, all that kind of stuff, to the point where it's almost like they've been proven true just with how heavily associated they are with him. So we're going to call them allegations for the sake of this. um, so despite these allegations that become synonymous with Michael Jackson, people don't necessarily seem too concerned generally with listening to his music, even publicly. And I wanted to talk about this because I feel like it's an interesting point with public perception where Michael Jackson, to a lot of people, is considered to be like the king of pop, one of the greatest musicians of all time. His music was loved and all this kind of stuff. And it almost seems like he's put in a different category because of this, where if you were to hear someone listening to let's say Murder on My Mind by YNW Melly, who is in jail for murder that could be directly associated to the song. It might be proven it's not directly associated, but regardless, pretty close. You'd probably think, oh, they know the song, they know the subject matter, they know he's in jail for murder. They're probably like not super appalled by that, right? But if you heard
Yeah.
somebody listening to like Thriller or Human Nature or something by Michael Jackson, you could assume that they're not taking a stance because his music is just so globally known, so popular. People are like, oh, it's such a hit, such a good song, that some people might listen to his music without really feeling the need to ever get involved with, the politics of it. And it seems like publicly people just let it slide because they don't feel like that person has the responsibility to do so because the music is so widespread. So I guess I'm just kind of asking what you think of that whole situation.
Okay, I have to preface my answer just because I'm going to be talking about it by saying that when I'm talking about this, I 100% believe that the allegations are true. So just prefacing that because that can't be taken out of my answer. Um, I think that the Michael Jackson case is honestly like super gross and disgusting, and I think that this like because of the current crowd perception of it, people feel like they don't need to take a stance and to say anything because because their opinion is going to be so small, and it doesn't matter if they listen or if they don't, they're not going to get reprimanded either way because so many people still support and even back up the fact that like the allegations may not be true, which I think is still like so crazy. Um, so again, like this goes back to what I was saying earlier about like the group. Just because the group and society's perception of something may be one way or another doesn't mean that it's immoral or moral. And in this case, like even though it's accepting, like that it is pretty widely accepted, and I could go to the dining hall and hear Jackson 5 playing or like some, I don't know, whatever other Michael Jackson song, like that doesn't mean that he like that doing that isn't that he is not that he's not immoral. I guess if that makes sense. Like public perception in my eyes, it's just like this is and especially in this case, this is something that's going to keep getting brought up over and over and over again, and like it's I'm almost hoping for the day that everybody decides to educate themselves on the subject and make a stance and realize that this is like a wrong thing. But I think also it's just because of the timeline of everything that happened and how he was already such a big global phenomenal king of pop, and everybody and their grandparents had listened to him, and like I just think like it was the perfect combination of everything for Michael Jackson to just not need to be held accountable. But I still think that like again, regardless of group opinion, like his actions were immoral. He is, and I personally also because of that don't listen to him. Like it's if you do, that's your choice. But I still think that like there's there needs to be lines that are drawn in the sand when it comes to Michael Jackson, and people are just uncomfortable with discussing that.
Yeah.
That's
So
my opinion.
yeah, in summary, just the quality of your work doesn't give you an excuse from judgment. Like people should still,
Absolutely not.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yep,
Um,
absolutely, absolutely not. Doesn't not in my eyes at least.
yeah, of course. So last but not least, we have immoralism. So just to preface this, the other ones I've tried to be, just asking questions, whatever. But I kind of favor immoralism. I'll just be straight up, and I'm gonna kind of just give a big debriefing at one point and just kind of explain my whole view on something because I want to get specific, and like specific questions asked in a certain path. So just
Sounds
to
good.
um, so immoralism is the idea that moral flaws can result in artistic problems for the artist to solve, which can result in aesthetic success. So if moral flaws create an artistic hurdle that can be surmounted, then surmounting that hurdle should be an artistic achievement. Just first of all, what do you think about that?
Um, hmm. I think that I think that that in many cases I've found to be true, and I hate to say it again, but I guess it depends on the case by case situation of it. But like, but I would say that like in a lot of cases, like overcoming having that additional obstacle and being able to like overcome that, and then like that can just make your work more expressive, and like I don't know. I'm not going to necessarily say better, but like I think that it just gives like that like deeper level of understanding, and just like can be a deeper quality because of that.
Completely agree. All right, so now I'm gonna kind of go into my whole bit, and you'll see why I completely agree with that. So,
Okay.
my, I'm just gonna need a minute. my my personal belief with music and a lot of art is that people who are on the farthest end of the spectrum for any kind of experience will produce the best work for that because they'll cover the rest of the spectrum. So what I mean by that is, let's take the range of happy to sad, and let's say that someone who's really, really, really sad, like at the farthest end of the spectrum, like really bad depression, really horrible life experience, all this kind of stuff, like has had barely any good moments in their life and just really down. If they're all the way over here on the spectrum and this is like the middle point, we're just gonna discard the whole happy side. This is the middle point. We have, I would like to say that if you're down here, your music will cover the whole range of things. So if you had a bad day, or if you had like a breakup, or something even like worse happened, that you would find some bit of solace and comfort in their music, being that there's a little bit of everything that has led up to that moment. Versus if someone writes about having a bad day, right? If you are past that point, then that only covers this range. And someone who's had a much worse experience won't get as much out of that. So basically, what I'm saying is, the worst possible thing, everybody can find a little bit of relatability. Everybody can be like, okay, well, if you're going through this whole turmoil of emotions, I've been through this little like segment of that turmoil. And I just find that those people who are at the end of those spectrums oftentimes have been through a lot and typically can be considered immoral artists in some way or form because of some way they've acted out as a result of the stuff they've had to endure. Before I go into examples, what do you think about that?
I think that I've never really thought about it that way before, but I completely agree. Um, I just think that like this goes exactly with what I was just saying before, like the having to overcome that hurdle and like be at the lowest possible sadness, I guess. Like I'm just gonna say sadness in this sense, like
Yeah,
that like if something in my life has happened that's even like minor and I just want to listen to something sad, like that's always going to do the job for me versus like I don't know if I don't know if my dog dies and then I'm listening to like a sad like a mediocrely sad song, like it's not gonna do that same for me if I want to like truly be able to deeply feel that emotion. Um, and I think that like definitely also relates on the happy spectrum, but it's just easier to talk about and to like be able to pinpoint when we're talking about like down to lower, especially with the moral actions, and immoralism. But like I definitely so far, I have to hear what you say next, but I definitely so far agree with you on that.
yeah. Um, and like you're saying, we're just not going to be happy right now just because I feel like there's more of a sad for comfort. You know what I mean? So then, like, if you're happy, you're kind of just trying to like celebrate it. um,
Yeah, exactly. 100% agree.
so my example is XXXTentacion, X, whatever you want to call him. I'll just call him X for the sake of saving words. Um, so he himself is known to be a very immoral person. At least I believe it's been confirmed at this point. Some of the stuff he's done, but there's a lot of alleged stuff on top of
Yeah.
it, and a lot of it stems from, I'd say, so he passed away when he was 20, 21, 20, I believe. And a lot of the stuff that he's done immorally that has come out is more so, I'd say, not in the last like year of his life, but around the time when he started making music and about halfway through making music, a lot of the stuff came out that he was doing, and a lot of it's like abuses and assaults and things like that in various different places with different people. Just things that, and sorry, I gotta give more to this. He himself clearly deals with depression and other like mental health things and life experiences and things like that that make his life and his thoughts and things very difficult to cope with and deal with. And his music is very much so an outlet for him where he's kind of just giving us what's going through his head. And part of the it's kind of like this connection between how awful he's doing and partially a connection to how he's committing these awful actions. And that's not to say that everyone who's doing poorly has like some justified right to do bad things. I'm just saying that you can kind of draw parallels between like he's in an awful place, he made a bad decision, that kind of stuff. I'm trying to pick my words pretty carefully right now, but
Yeah.
part of his story is that through his music and support and things like that, he kind of started to feel this like growth and like this growth and this retribution, and kind of started to find a way to be like, I was at this awful place, but now I'm getting better and things are looking up for me. And not only taking comfort in his earlier stuff to be like, oh, this is sad music, I'm sad, this is comforting, but his fans could also see like if he was at this lowest point and I'm wherever, I can also make it to be a better person again or to have better life experiences or just kind of get out of this hole that I'm in right now. So, in my mind, despite these immoral actions he's committed, I find that his there's this hurdle to be said in his growth. And even if, well, I'll get to that later, but this hurdle in this journey that so many people have found comfort in. I mean, I know people that take a lot of comfort in his music and like their lives have practically been saved because of just like his the comfort they found in the music when they're in awful places, you know. I just can't help but think that this has to be beneficial art. That's a lot, sorry. I just had to lay it all out.
No, no, you're good. Yeah. Um, I find this X case to be really difficult because I completely agree that like I think he did a lot of good and he really helped a lot of people. And again, like I know people who also personally like were able to find comfort and were able to, I guess, like um find that relatability with X and also be able to like using his music to help them grow and overcome what they were dealing with and also again to find like comfort in this guy that's expressing it so beautifully. um I think that like I think it's difficult because even though he did grow up and he had to overcome a lot of hurdles and obstacles early on, even like leading into his mental health, like I don't think that necessarily he needed I don't think that like he needed to have all of his to commit immoral actions as a result of that in order to make this music, if that makes sense. Like um it helped I think he has a lot of like great depth as a person that like helped him to create this music, but I don't think that necessarily like his immoral actions should also be excused just because of that, because I'm like a pretty strong believer that like oh, let's see if we can get this to work. Testing, testing, three, testing, one, two, three.
Good, you're good.
We're
Ah,
good.
shoot. Yeah, you're saying something about his immoral actions. You didn't think he had.
Yeah, yeah. I was just saying that like I don't think that necessarily like he needed to commit these immoral actions in order to have like as incredible depth of music. Like there's a lot of instances of artists who like grew up in really, really awful situations. And like the artist Elliott Smith, um, who he had suffered a childhood, a really, really rough childhood. And then as a result of that had like severe severe depression and mental health problems and like which may or may not have led to his death. It's still kind of unknown the way that he died, whether or not it was. But either way, like he made incredibly sad but like so beautiful and artistic and like when you listen to it, you just wanna, like, cry. You can feel the emotions, like, and I think that he's another example of, like, that same end of the spectrum, except, like, unlike X, he hadn't become the product of his environment and repeating any of those actions, if that makes sense. Like, he he definitely, like, probably did some bad things in his life, but there wasn't anything that was like, he never turned his abuse around on other people and was still, like, able to overcome the hurdles of his life and to create this music. So I think that, like, again, I'm not saying that, like, I'm not saying that X wasn't beneficial and that his music and everything isn't phenomenal, and, like, again, the hurdles that he overcome, like, definitely still do contribute to the depth of his work, but I think that, like, it's gotta be one of those things again on an individual, like, basis where, like, whether or not I still feel comfortable enjoying and listening to his music because of, um, his immoral actions, and for me, I still do because, I think that he's really that what he has done is really important, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I think that he was the best person by any means,
Yeah, of
if that
course.
makes sense.
Yeah. And I think that part of what you started to dig at a little bit is something that I was going to say. And it's just that I was originally talking, thinking, oh, maybe his hurdle was that he was doing so bad. And now he's kind of, there's growth, right? And he's doing better. I don't think that he necessarily needed that growth to be. I think it helped him as like I mean helped more people that he had that growth, but his music to start where he was just having a confession, I think that was still extremely helpful to people. And I'm kind of just posing this as an idea to you, but I'm starting to think his hurdle from his immoralism, because the growth from being a bad person to like a better person isn't necessarily the hurdle he had to jump. I think the hurdle from his immoral actions might have been just confessing in terms of his music that he's not the best. You know what I mean? Like maybe not
Yeah,
confessing to his
completely.
actions, but yeah, like confessing that like a confessional of like I'm doing bad, I'm not doing good, this is how I feel, this is that, and that's his artistic hurdle, his moral hurdle, I feel like.
Yeah, no, I would completely agree with that. I think that, like, even just being able to do that is a really, really, really huge step in, like, any sort of growth, just being able to admit it, and especially to do it so largely and so publicly. And I think that's, like, why a lot of people really connect with him too, because of the fact that, like, he is so open and honest about, like, the everything that he's had to overcome, and, like, being able to again, like, listen to his confessional maybe could also inspire other people to, like, get and confess to what also, like, they are struggling with and have been dealing with.
Exactly, and this is not to say that we forgive him in any way, but this is about going back to R. Kelly to say that I think we'd have a different perception of him if he had used maybe his music not to cover up, but to voice for like advocacy for people that struggled with maybe like that help people that had similar mental like flaws as him that led him to commit his actions, that maybe raised awareness like people are like this, and if you're like this get help, and like in the same way that is again
Yeah.
careful wording is needed here. What I'm trying to
Mhm.
say is in X's situation, X is like I'm not doing the best, maybe you're not doing the best, the listener, and we're gonna get through it. Versus in R. Kelly's situation, R. Kelly clearly had stuff messed up with his like head and his thinking process to commit the
Yeah.
actions he did. But his music, like Age Ain't Nothing But a Number, that's like a defense. That's like a pop star cover. That's
Yeah.
justification. If he came out clean and it was just like, hey, I have these awful thoughts in my head, I'm gonna let the public know, and maybe this will help people that have similar thoughts in their head to not act on them. That it's like these two different routes. And again, not to say that
Yeah.
we're gonna like forgive him or make a situation where like he's a good person. He'd still be a bad person anyways. But I'm just saying a way he could have used music, maybe like X did, to help people instead of providing a defense for himself.
Yeah, I feel like again, yeah, you did use very careful wording, but I don't know if like I don't know necessarily I would find like the R. Kelly situation to be the perfect example of that, but I completely get what you're saying. Like
Yeah,
I think a big part about like people being able to even just find like forgiveness is to have the artist like be real and really like open up and not again use the denial of the bad things that they're doing. Like ownership is a really, really huge thing. And while it doesn't excuse the actions, like I think that even just makes people like respect the person more. And again, don't know the most about like the R. Kelly case. The like, if I really that's a very special situation, but like I just think that like people are able to enjoy X because of how real that he was through everything. And again, I just don't know how the situation could have turned out differently for other people. But I think that like a big being open and taking ownership of your moral actions is like a very, very huge step in at least in having like a different public perception. If that makes sense, like having people respect you even just a little bit more without still completely forgiving you for the actions, but like recognizing that you're at least acknowledging that they're also immoral actions. I think that's just like that's a really important thing to do.
completely. And you said something much better than I did in terms of word choice. I just for the listener just address that, like Matea just said, R. Kelly's not the best example. I only used it because we brought him up earlier. But again, like just like the
Yeah.
archetype of either defending or coming clean. That's all.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So thank you for giving me the words for that.
Of
Um,
course.
so then the last example I have, I almost hate to use it because everyone uses him and everything. It's just Kanye West. I mean,
There you go.
I love
Yeah.
him as an artist. I take it you do as a member of, hip hop club that we're both in.
Yes, yes, I
Um,
do.
so not to just bring him up to bash on him senselessly, but to talk about him as an example. So I want to first of all talk about something that kind of bridges a lot of artists that fit in this category, and that's this idea of rough heroes that this theory suggests. So, characters with egregious moral flaws that the artwork nevertheless invites us to identify with, people that might be irredeemably flawed. So, kind of something I forgot to mention with X is just this idea that maybe he's irredeemably flawed in some senses. Maybe we see, I mean, he's dead at this point, so I guess he didn't really have the opportunity to prove if he was irredeemably flawed or not. But the concept of maybe this person won't turn into like a moral person, but I
Mhm.
can still relate to him in some sense. I'm gonna identify with him in some sense, maybe feel empathetic, sympathetic for the mental situation he finds himself in and relate myself to that. But moving to Kanye, we have not only some sense of that, but well, all context. So Kanye's music, I feel like, is this direct lens into his thoughts at multiple stages of his life. And part of it is because he's so honest, like how we were just talking about
Mhm.
Expo as an artist like that. So if you take a timeline of pop culture events Kanye's been involved in, so the Taylor Swift VMA incident, or even just personal life events like his mom dying, and things like even right now, the divorce with Kim. You have the bipolar incidents where he was just talking about going to hospitalization, things like that, and then his involvement with the election in 2016 and the MAGA hat and all that kind of stuff. And then you line his albums up with it and the music he's put out, it all lines up. It all tells a story. It's like even though
Mhm.
he changes like genres, whatever, between albums, it's just this direct like he puts his thoughts in the moment on the record. When the Taylor Swift incident happened, he went out to Hawaii, secluded himself, and he just wrote about the backlash he was facing, things like that. So I think because of that, that even if you think in any way he's immoral, regardless of that, his artistry gives us this lens to look at his thoughts. And I think that there can't be, I'm giving you a lot to answer to, I'm sorry.
It's okay, it's okay.
I
Whew.
think that no matter how immoral the person is, if we are given, if what they're giving us is just, here are my thoughts, that can't be like immoral work because it's just pure. There's nothing like you have to think this, you have to think that. It's just their thoughts, and you can just make judgments. Even if it's like the worst thoughts ever, you're like, well, this is you, you know? This is just like you're being honest with me. Take what you want from it. I gave you too much.
Yeah, I think that that's a really interesting case, and obviously I'm gonna be super biased because I really like Kanye, and not only like I'm not saying that I'm like the biggest, like, smartest fanatic on him, but, like, I read a biography, like, all about his life as well. So, like, from my perspective, I completely agree, and I am able to literally pinpoint, like, everything that he's done through his music, and then even before then, like, all of the actions that have led up because of, like, this thing that happened when he was 4, and then his mom when they went to Japan, like, literally, I think that Kanye is such a unique case when it comes to this specifically, just because, yeah, like, I don't even know I don't know how I feel like every time there's some new news about Kanye, something that he's done, like, positively or negatively, and again, maybe this just really has to play into, like, the parasocial relationship that I, like, unknowingly have subjected myself to, but, like, I literally think of it as, like, "Oh, what is he going through in his life right now?" Like, "Oh, yeah, that makes sense because because Pete Davidson and Pete just said this about him in his performance at SNL and that in his Netflix special, like, every single thing I'm like, "Okay, well, this reaction, like, feeds off of this," and I don't necessarily think that that's great or that it's healthy, but in the sense of his music, I think that that is, like, that he's really cool because we really do have like a blueprint of Kanye's life. And I don't know how well I would be able to just like I don't know if he committed a grave immoral action, what I would even be able to like how I would be able to process that. But I do think that like I personally would already like um even like almost unknowingly and like from a biased perspective like give him more leeway just because of like how much I know about him and like experiences that he's had in his life and all of the things that he also has had to overcome.
Completely agree. And like you're saying, it goes into the context of like what we know about him. So like you're saying with like Ariana Grande versus like someone that already raps about like killing people. We have an expectation, right? And we have a justification system. So it's like, oh, you said you're gonna do that and you did it. Like that's expected. Versus Ariana Grande, if she killed someone, we'd be like, where does that come from? Like, what was in
Yeah.
your head? We didn't think that. But like with Kanye, like what I was trying to say when I said that it's like almost hard to call anything he does immoral. It's just because we have so much information. Like you're saying, if you kept up with his music,
Yeah.
it's really hard to be outraged by anything he does because you're like, no, I get it. Because
Yeah.
you're looking at anything. So like if you like the MAGA hat thing, right? His when it came out at first I was like, I wonder. I like looked some stuff up, right? But then I was like, no, I don't agree with what he's doing. I really don't. But I completely know where he's coming from. I think it's a bad decision, but I
Yeah.
know where he's coming from because he's always been the contrarian and that's his thing. He wants to prove a point, he wants to be ahead of the times and this, that, and he likes who Trump is as a person. He doesn't know anything about his policies, but he likes who he is as a person because he likes this and this and this. And when you can do that, like if I can take an incident that happens right now in someone's life, like let's say not even examples. If you can take an incident that happens in someone's life right now and then trace it back to the impact that their mom's death had on them, and then also like their early rap career and the connections that they made, and just build it up in blocks, like, oh yeah, when he was like 20 something, um, some girl dumped
Mhm.
him and he also didn't have a lot of money. He had to take her out to like KFC for dates, like he raps about. And then you can just go bop 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 bop. That caused this, caused this, caused.
Yeah, 100%.
Then how can you can disagree with it, but you can't be like this came out of left field. You can completely justify it with his own life experiences, even if you don't agree with it.
Completely, like, I think that that was a lot better of kind of way of articulating what I was saying, like, even if it's not something that I necessarily would agree with, like you said, I could just be like, "Oh, yeah, like, I get where he's coming from, like, I understand where he's coming from," and again, if it was something that was, like if he, like, killed somebody, I don't know, like, I can't even say what my reaction to that would be. I'm not just gonna be like, "Ah, classic Kanye," like, I don't I think there's different, there's everything is, on a different scale a little bit, but, like, definitely, at least, like, the way that I've treated everything that he's done so far has very much been like a case of like, Kanye did this thing. Do I agree with it? Yes, no. Okay. But do I see where he's coming from and like why he's doing this right now? Yes. And I think I can answer yes for probably almost every single thing that he's ever done. So that does make for a really interesting case, I would say.
Yeah, and it's I mean that same principle is kind of what factors into just having friends with different beliefs in general. Like if you meet some random person on the internet, you're just like commenting back and forth with, and they have a different view than you, you're gonna like trash them probably and call them stupid. But if it's your friend who you've grown up with forever, and let's say like they're on different side of the political spectrum, but it's because one of their parents is from this part of the country and they have a different political view,
Yeah.
and also like something something I don't know, you're like, oh, again, I disagree, but I know exactly where you're coming from. I almost can't blame you because your situation is this and my situation is this, and it's like we know too much. And when we're talking about that too, it's like we have this engagement with, let's just take Kanye again for example, with Kanye,
Mhm.
where we follow him so closely that it feels like he's someone we know, that parasocial relationship you mentioned,
Yeah.
and it adds to our appreciation of the artist and their hurdles, and we can talk to it about we can talk to it you and I, and like we can talk about it with our other friends because so many people are fans of his. And when it's like this thing where like there's still outsiders though that don't understand, so it feels like a dedicated thing. And whenever something comes up, it feels like our responsibility almost to defend him against the court of public opinion, you know, so it's even more of an
Yeah.
engagement that he's overcoming these hurdles. And just to add one more thing on top of that, there's this quote from Charles McGrath that says, "The cruel thing about art, or great art anyway, is that it requires its practitioners to be wrapped up in themselves in a way that's a little inhuman." And with Kanye, because he gives us everything and because he always speaks his mind, even if that's on like Twitter and not even on music, he's so vulnerable that he gets in trouble for being vulnerable. And that it's this cycle. And it's just this thing where
Yeah.
it's like he something happens, he gives his honest response, something happens that brings up another event because of that, and it go ba 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 ba, and it's just
Ugh.
everything's documented, and it's this thing where it's like he's almost creating more material in his life to make music about by making music about the earlier stuff and then running into something because of it.
Yeah. Here's the thing, like, when we're talking about all this, I'm thinking a little bit more I don't think that Kanye is necessarily, like in this like, relationship dynamic, I don't think that he is unique in that way. I just think that the way that, like, Kanye how like, the way that it's specifically happening to him is so unique because it's on such a greater scale that you don't have to be, like, a mega Kanye fan and, like, to still be able to map all this out. Like, for my favorite rappers and artists, I'm sure that, like, I would be able to like, I also have that same, like, kinda relationship where I'm like, "Oh my god, like, JPEG Mafia rapped about this is what he's talking about, and this is what's going on in his life." And I know that because like I'm so close to following everything that he does, and that's like a pretty dedicated thing. But I feel like with Kanye, it's like you don't even have to have that level of dedication, and it's just so out there. And I think that's also what like again, you were just saying it's like it's so crazy because everything that he does is like he's literally wrapped in this cycle of and it's genius, but I can't imagine how, like, taxing it is on him to just
Yeah.
like, I wonder when where that breaking point is even gonna be able to come, because right now it's like he's sacrificing himself to create, like, the best music and the most, like, vulnerable music, and I just wonder how much like he's gonna even be able to take.
Yeah, and also like you're saying, the example of that justification isn't just him. Like you're saying with JPEG Mafia, like for me it'd probably be like Young Lean or something like that, where I know like he had his mental health struggles and he had this whole awful experience down like Miami this one time and this and God bless him, he's like a great person, so I never have to worry about this. But if something was to come up, there's not a huge court of public opinion to be held because people don't really care as much as they would about Kanye.
Yeah.
Because they don't know JPEG Mafia and Young Lean, like just your very average random person wouldn't know who those people are. So it is like with Kanye, like you're saying, it's just a bigger thing. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, and that definitely makes it something else because there's that like I didn't even think about the examples of other artists because my mind just went to him because of that
Yeah.
gravity of that.
Well, again, it's the whole group and like societal mentality of it. Like with Kanye, it's there's such like a greater public opinion about it. Um, and like there's so many people that are like able to give their input on any of the sides just because of the fact that like Kanye makes himself so publicly known and everything that he does. And he's just like he's a huge, huge important rapper. Like I can't imagine him not being like a household name. And like that is the group perception is something that like a lot of smaller artists don't have outside of like the niche community of whatever it is that their genre or like whatever it is that they subscribe to. Um, so I think like I don't know. I think Kanye is just I think he's so special. Like I just think he's special in like so many ways. And I know that that's not that just I just wanted to say that on the record. Like I just think that he's great. I really enjoy Kanye. But
Yeah.
hopefully he doesn't make me eat my words at some point. But
Yeah.
but I and he very well could. Knowing him, he probably will,
Yeah.
but still.
We'll find a way to justify it. Uh,
Yeah, for sure.
so that's kind of the end of that. Yeah. Anything else to say?
Um, no, I don't think so. Not I mean, I guess I liked Immoralism the best for sure.
Agreed.
Like now that I found myself just liking that one a lot more than the others. I don't what was it? I didn't like the normative perspective very much. I thought that the other two were just a lot more closed-minded. Um, but like kind of my recap on everything on all my thoughts is just like everything is really a case by case situation, and it's all about like whether or not I don't think there's really a right answer, and then anything you can't put a broad label saying like that you can't say something like a moral artist means a moral art because it really like that's just such a broad statement and it needs to be able to be taken case by case, otherwise it can do a lot of harm, like in my opinion. But also you yourself should be able to
Good now. You're good now.
I'm good. Okay, okay, okay. I was just saying that like you yourself should be able to make the decision like whether or not you want to listen to them. And I guess it should just be like a case for everybody that maybe you should be a little bit more aware of who and you're listening to, what they subscribe to, and also like the content that you are and how it could affect other people. Like I think that's just got to be a personal decision, and like whether or not you feel comfortable listening to it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that like if you do and I don't, then one of us is wrong,
Yeah,
in my opinion.
completely agreed. All right. Well, thank you so much for this. Appreciate
Yeah, of course.
it.
Hopefully the recording worked.